He was no Winston Churchill in debating, but he was fine. And people say he was on performance-enhancing drugs.
He's sort of like Goebbels. You say the lie long enough, keep repeating it, it becomes common knowledge.
The president and Joe Biden both amping up the rhetoric on the eve of their first debate. So let's get a preview of tomorrow night's showdown with the co-chair of Hometown Values PAC, Ethan Behrman, and Trump 2020 senior legal advisor, Jenna Ellis. Welcome to you both.
Good evening, Shannon.
Okay, I'm going to start here with the week. The headline is Trump literally can't afford to lose the election. They're talking about the initial New York Times story, talking about the president's tax return, saying this. It raises the troubling question of whether Trump can literally afford to lose power on November 3rd and what he might do to prevent an electoral defeat and financial ruin. Jenna.
Yeah, well, the president relies on sophisticated tax counsel and CPAs in order to prepare his returns, and he rightly said that this is fake news. Listen, this timing of this story is simply a distraction from Joe Biden not being willing to answer any of the tough questions, and that's what he's going to have to do when he faces President Trump tomorrow. And I hope that part of this is going to be asking him about his own tax plan, which is going to shrink the economy. It would destroy millions of jobs, and for the 82% of Americans that received a Trump tax cut, they're looking at an average increase of $1,260. And so for the Democrats, you know, like Ethan, who owns their own small business, and for the middle class Americans who understand that they pay taxes and that they understand tax credits and tax exemptions, if they're seriously looking at this and clutching their pearls, they are either lying to you or they're just plain stupid.
Okay, Ethan, she's looking out for you there and your small business. I will have you note that. Listen, we know the president has talked about for years that he doesn't want to pay any more taxes than he has to. He says he'd be dumb to do that. So we know he's had that line before we ever saw this. But the Federalist has this. It's authorized. The author is somebody who is a tax preparer, knows the tax code, that kind of thing. He talks about the first thing we have to discuss. He says it's a federal crime for any federal, state, or local government employee to release a tax return without the consent of the taxpayer. It's also illegal to print or publish tax returns or information from them. Someone should go to jail for releasing his tax return. So, Ethan, before we get to the story itself, should we at least acknowledge that part of the conversation?
Well, if a government official is the one who did it, then I think that there might be an issue there. However, that's a classic misdirection technique that my magician grandfather would have been very proud of, because what we have going on here is a president who pays less in taxes than a firefighter, than a teacher, than a nurse in an average given year. And, you know, the right likes to point at BLM and their arguments over defund the police. Well, President Trump paying that little in taxes is doing a great job of defunding the police if you're not going to put money into the government's coffers. Look, there's a lot of questions that are open to be examined here. In particular, what was he saying to banks on one hand versus the tax authorities on another? He's exposing himself for potential either bank fraud or tax fraud investigations that are possibly going to come out of all of this. We'll find out because the New York State AG is wanting to take a closer look.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is true. And the president has disputed the numbers. He says it's fake news. It's not true. Maybe he'll release more information. I don't know. But he is taking issue with these numbers, saying they are not accurate. So this is, you know, coming from the New York Times. But let's talk about this, Jenna, the issue of tax avoidance versus tax evasion. I mean, those are two very different things. It's one thing if you use a good team to come up and help you avoid taxes, but is that difference going to mean anything to the American people who hear what Ethan just said about the amount that the president allegedly paid, at least as the New York Times is representing?
Yeah, well, there were a lot of things that were wrong and inaccurate with the New York Times story, and I think that it's inappropriate for Ethan to compare anything to, you know, any other sort of income-driven person. And so anyone understands that you can use an accountant to leverage those types of credits and exemptions, and nobody likes paying more taxes than they're required to. And so that is absolutely a difference legally between exemptions versus avoidance. avoidance and evasion. All of those things are legal distinctions. And, you know, I'm certainly not a tax expert, but I obviously rely on other people who are to make sure that I don't have to pay more than what I owe. And I would assume that Ethan, again, if he's smart, will also take those types of exemptions so that he can keep more for himself and his family. That's the entire purpose of why President Trump, as a businessman, has lowered taxes for the American people, and why Joe Biden tomorrow night is going to have to face that fact.
Let me get Ethan in here for a very quick final word before we get cut off.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the clear explanation why Trump lied about hiding his taxes since he promised to release them during the 2016 campaign. It shows that he doesn't make money. He's not the successful businessman he claims to be. Otherwise, he would owe taxes if he was so successful. He isn't. He lied about an audit precluding him from releasing this information. He can release it any time. If Jenna thinks the New York Times has it wrong, President Trump can release his taxes like every president has done in my lifetime.
Okay.
And this president refuses to do so.
My understanding is that they did find there was an audit ongoing. We will double check that and let people know about that. Ethan and Jenna,
they did.
Thank you both very much.
He's